Hello, my name is Jessica Reed. I'm one of the prevention specialists at Renz Center, and I'll be moderating this conversation for tonight. So we're part of the coalition, and we're honored that you guys are here tonight. So up first, we have Mayor David Kaptain. David Kaptain is Elgin's current mayor, having been on the council since 2005 and recently re-elected as Elgin's mayor. A founding member of the Elgin Community Network, he is a retired chief chemist and director of process control for the Fox River Water Reclamation District and holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Bradley University. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much. You know, just a few things to say, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal life and the issues that I've seen. And I'm going to start talking about, we're going to be talking about addictive behavior and drug abuse and alcohol abuse. But Elgin just went through a discussion on, less than a year ago. We talked about smoking, and we talked about vaping. And those things create an addictive behavior that may stay with you your whole life. I always laugh. I talk about people, well, I don't have a problem. No, but you're the guy that said to me, gee, if I don't get my coffee in the morning, I'm not any good for anything. So there are many, many things that cause addictive behavior. We took a leadership role when we talked about vaping, and I took it very personally. I used to be a smoker. And I saw what was happening in the publicity and what was going on in the schools, and I saw that as a real threat. What the drug companies and those companies were doing was addicting young people to nicotine. And they say, well, it's a healthy form of smoke. It's not healthy. They put one of the worst, most addictive chemicals known to mankind in those things and gave it to 12 and 13-year-old kids. That is not acceptable to me. So we fought in the city of Elgin, so we want an ordinance. We don't want anybody under 21 to be able to purchase them. And my vision for that was bigger than just the smoking. I understand that they can make that decision sometime in your life. When you get to be 21 years old, you can decide that. But when a company comes to you and tells you that this won't hurt you and this is good for you, they're misleading you. And I'll go back, I'm 70 years old, and I'll go back, I was the Marlboro Man in 1968. That's what they sold me on, is the guy on that horse, and I thought I am that guy, and that was the advertising, and I started to smoke. And I got addicted to cigarettes. I smoked for almost 20 years. When I quit smoking, I talked to a guy that had quit, and he talked about the addiction and the problem that went with it. And he said, Dave, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have to get rid of the habit. And the habit is, you're doing this. You're looking for where your cigarettes are. You're trying to figure, I never went anywhere. I might forget my shoes, but I would never forget my cigarettes and my lighter. And then he said, when you get over that habit, he said in 6 months or 7 months, there's going to be a little man inside of you that says you need to have a cigarette. And that's the chemical addiction coming out. It takes that long. And that was true for me. And it took me 2 years to finally quit smoking. But I did it. Best decision I made in my life. So anybody can become addicted. You can become addicted to McDonald's. You can become addicted to running. People say that they get the rush from running and it causes their blood pressure to change and they get involved in just the concept of running. We have to be careful. Anything in moderation is good and can be okay, almost anything. And but we have to overcome some of those things, and sometimes they can be pretty hard. Financial ruin for the city of Elgin. When I talk about drugs, I always look back at the cost to us. It cost to us as a society and to the city. We have the police department here. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every year trying to track down and trying to avoid and trying to make sure that drug and alcohol is not a problem in our city. And I'll never forget, I was a novice. I'm still a novice in this whole fight. I had a police officer come to talk to me. We're talking about drug addiction. Elgin police officer. He was undercover. Came in and he talked to me about drugs and what was going on in the city and what he was seeing. And we started to talk about opioids at that time, were just becoming something that we were seeing in the western suburbs of Chicago. He said how they got here. Then he sat down and said, I'm going to show you this picture. And he showed me a picture of a bad apartment in the city of Elgin. It was dirty, it was filthy, and on the bed in that apartment was $1 million in cash. And to me, that set the boundary. This is a money-driven thing. People are taking this and they want to get us addicted. They want to get people addicted because it makes them money. He said most of the people that sell drugs don't use them. They avoid them because they know the downfall. They've already learned the lesson. He said, so we stay away from it. He talked to me about heroin addiction and addiction to different kinds of drugs. And it stuck with me and it will stick with me the rest of my life. He said, I know people and run into people in my job that were occasional cocaine users. He said they could do it on a weekend and quit. He said with heroin, doesn't work like that. One time, and he said you can become addicted. One time user. Not a good thing. You become addicted to life. And I'm going to tell you the last story. My neighbor, nice family, hardworking people, hardworking couple. They're probably in their 60s now. They have a son. This young man got addicted to drugs at the age of 14 at a local high school. And went through high school, struggled, bad grades, got out, couldn't get rid of the drug problem, kept going on, got arrested, went to jail, got arrested for possession of marijuana with too much possession to sell, got sent to jail again, second time. They sent him into rehab, they sent him into all kinds of programs. And finally one day his dad came and walked over to my house right next door and he says, Dave, it's finally over. The young guy died, 37 years old, died of an overdose. What a bad way to go. A whole life wasted, 23 years of a wasted life of a young man because of drug and heroin addiction. The city's dedicated through through the Renz Center, through Ecker. We see this as a multi-faceted problem. We need to work at it. We need to look at prevention. We need to talk to young people. The best prevention is not to start. Don't get involved. Walk away. Talk about being a man. When I was 16 or 18 years old, and I thought that being a Marlboro man would make Dave Kaptain a man. Well, it didn't. All it made was a smoker out of Dave. And I suggest that you be a man, be a strong young woman, and avoid those problems, and don't let that start in your life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Up next we have
Senator Castro, is she next?
Yeah.
This is Senator Castro.
I thought it was. All right, we have Senator Castro. Senator Cristina Castro represents the 22nd District, which includes 10 different communities located within Cook and Kane County. She's a second-generation Mexican-American and lifelong district resident. She holds a Master's of Business Administration from Northern Illinois University, and she has been in public service since 2008. She serves on the Latino Caucus, multiple committees, including being the chair of the Veteran Affairs Committee, and she and her husband live in Elgin with their 3 dogs. Senator Castro, thank you.
Well, hello everybody. I actually was just walking in from another event, so apologies for a little late. So obviously, this is a very important issue affecting our communities. I see some of my former colleagues. So I served on the county board for 8 years, and I worked with Coroner Russell and State's Attorney McMahon, and we talked a lot about these issues between opioid addiction and drug addiction, and how we as a community can do a better job. I know Rob Russell has been very active in trying to get more funding for some of the, drugs to prevent the overdoses, or when someone's in an overdose. We as a state have looked at different aspects of how we can empower people more to be able to administer those types of drugs and also see the warning signs. The one thing that we have struggled with over the last few years, so this is my first term in office, this is my 3rd year, was funding. There was a stalemate for 2 years, which put a lot of pressure on a lot of our agencies to service folks who had addiction, who were going through the criminal system. And it fell upon a lot of local law enforcement as well as the counties to end up being very expensive hospitals, as I like to say. When I was the chairwoman of public safety, we talked about that. We looked at different ways of how do we address this issue at the front end, through adult, redeploy, to at the back end, how do we connect people to the much needed services that they provide. The one thing that has been different this year, as we just finished session on Sunday, was we actually properly funded addiction treatment on well at the tune of $39 million increase. We also increased mental health services to $43 million. The social service programs that we rely on here in our community saw an increase of about $80 million. So it was a lot to undo a lot of what they did not have for previous years, but also a small increase because we understand the need. Renz does a lot of different services, and it's imperative that we provide those services. It's imperative for families to know where to turn to and ask for help, to see the warning signs. We have to educate a lot of folks on what to do. And in the Latino community, with me being Latino, sometimes the mental health aspect, there's a stigma with that. And you see it, I championed a maternal health bill, and one of the things that I found through some of the studies is that mental health is kind of something you don't talk about, especially in the Latino community. Usually what ends up happening is if there's someone that has a mental illness, they end up going to church for prayer or to get some help from the priest. But it's much more beyond that. Yes, you should go, if you have a religion you follow, yes, you can go there, but you also need to identify the warning signs to get help for that loved one. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's millions and millions of Americans live with some sort of addiction or mental health issue. And so it is imperative that we learn, educate, and then help others through the process. I'm glad many of you are here to talk about these very important topics, but others may not know, or others might not know where to go or where to turn. So this is a very important topic, and I'm glad to be here, and I want to thank all of you for being here, because addiction has a tremendous impact to our communities, to our families, and we all have to be together, we have to work together to address this issue moving forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Up next we have our Kane County State's Attorney, Joe McMahon. Kane County State's Attorney since 2010, Mr. McMahon serves as Chief Legal and Law Enforcement Officer for more than 500,000 residents of Kane County. The office prosecutes criminal offenses on behalf of the people of Illinois and represents the legal interests of the County of Kane and all countywide elected officials. Joe oversees an office of 130 employees, including 60 attorneys. Joe earned his Juris Doctor from John Marshall Law School and Master's in Business Administration from the University of Notre Dame. He's a lifelong resident of Kane County and is a graduate of St. Edward's High School. He resides in Elgin with his wife and 3 children. Mr. McMahon.
Sorry, Joe.
I thought you were already hit my speech for me. I appreciate it. No, fire away.
Fellow citizen. No, I just needed to transfer something quick.
No worries. Thanks. Jess, thank you very much. And it's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation. And let me just kind of but recognize Senator Castro, because when she talks about the partnership that we had when she served on the county board, can't overstate the importance of that and the commitment that she made to public safety. And from my perspective, what I see coming into the court system are people that we've already kind of devoted a lot of resources to trying to keep them out of the criminal justice system. And I'm going to talk about that, but maybe most importantly, once they come into the system, what are we doing to make sure that they don't repeatedly return to the system and come back into the system? And Senator Castro provided great leadership when she was chairwoman of the Judicial and Public Safety Commission on the county board, and then when she was no longer chairman, as a very strong and vocal voice on the county board. So I appreciate that. And since you've been in Springfield, I've been there to talk about funding for mental health here in my hometown and your hometown, and I'm thrilled to see that the funding for that has increased dramatically. So I don't want to miss that opportunity to thank you for that great work recently and in the past. So let me talk about what we see in the criminal justice system. We see kind of a people that fall into a couple of different categories. We see people who are kind of self-medicating because they're going through a mental health episode, or they have some type of trauma that they're trying to deal with and compensate for, or some other type of addictive behavior. And I kind of compare that to someone who might just be an underage consumer of alcohol at a high school party, or maybe not even a high school party, but somebody who was under the age of 21 but consuming alcohol or some other type of illegal substance. And our response to kind of those two categories of people are very different. The goal with both of those categories is to get them to change their behavior. But the goal with the high school kid or the college-aged young adult is to both hold them accountable, but very early help them understand the risks of alcohol consumption, of illegal drug consumption, and really to change that behavior so we don't ever see them come back into the criminal justice system again. And we're able to do that through one of these diversion programs that we run, where people are held accountable, they go through alcohol counseling, but they can come out of that experience without some type of formal blemish on their record. So whether they're going to college or applying to trade school or just trying to get a job, not just, but trying to get a job in the community with some type of arrest or conviction on their record, we remove that obstacle as long as they kind of take ownership. They go through an alcohol education program. Sometimes it involves community service. And at the end, we'll dismiss that case entirely with the idea that long term, that will be a better outcome for both that individual and the community by using that as a teaching opportunity. And historically, we've had about a 92% success rate with people that come through these diversion programs, and we don't ever see them come back into the criminal justice system again. So these diversion programs work. It's not about punishment, it's about accountability, and it's about changing behavior. And over the last couple of years, we've had great success with that. That other category, the people who are self-medicating or kind of dealing with co-issues, comorbidities, co-occurring issues. Not comorbidity, that's a different topic. But co-occurring issues, right? Again, what we're trying to do is to align that individual with resources. And over the last couple of years, we've seen a much greater understanding of how to respond to that problem. We cannot respond to those challenges through arrests, through traditional forms of prosecution. And so again, what we're doing is we're investing a lot of resources into specialty courts and specialty programs where, again, we're holding people accountable. People are not going into jail for extended periods, oftentimes for any period of time, very early on to identify that issue, to respond to that, and help people really help themselves, because we can't force somebody to go through treatment. We can't force somebody to become unaddicted. There has to be a self-motivation. What we have found in the court system is that when the individual accepts responsibility and makes a commitment to change, we have to provide resources. We have to provide access to counseling. Sometimes it means access to health care. Sometimes it means access to housing. And I know here in the city of Elgin, the city council just approved kind of an assisted living development out of the old Larkin Center that's going to really work with that community to really complete that network, that social safety network that is critical to changing people's long-term behavior. Part of it is counseling, but a big part of it is job opportunities and a stable home environment. And if one of those changes, or one of those is lacking, it's kind of like that three-legged table. The other two, as great as they are, they just will not take hold and have a long-term impact. So for that population that is dealing with that co-occurring addiction, our response is similar to the diversion programs, but it is a much more resource-intensive commitment to that population, because it can't just be counseling and community service. There has to be a housing piece, there has to be oftentimes a medical piece, oftentimes there has to be kind of wraparound services for insurance and Medicaid enrollment and different types of programs. But one of the most recent things that we did here, and the last presentation we had was out at Kimball Middle School. I brought in a group from Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. It was a family that had gone through the horrific life experience of alcohol addiction that turns into drug addiction, that turns into opioid addiction, that turns into kind of near-death occurrences with overdoses. And it is a mother and a daughter and their brother. Their brother has gone through the addiction life cycle. They came in and they spoke, presented this across the county. Kimball at South Elgin High School, a couple locations in Aurora, and that program is really focused on what are the obvious signs that are right in front of us of alcohol use, drug use, and abuse that maybe we're not recognizing. What was there for this family that had they seen some of these signs early on, maybe they could have devoted resources, maybe they could have involved professional counseling at a much earlier stage before that addiction turned into a hardcore addiction and near-death occurrences for this family member who grew up in a very, we see this in law enforcement all the time. This is not an upper class, a lower class. This is not a minority. This is an issue that touches every community and socioeconomic group across the spectrum. And this family from Oconomowoc, Wisconsin is a very middle-class family. They have 2 kids. One became addicted to drug and alcohol, and the other is a very successful, has her master's, very accomplished young woman, and their 2 children who grew up in the same environment, in the same household, took very different paths. With hindsight, what were some of those signals that they missed, that had they seen, they could have taken action on much earlier, and maybe changed the long-term course of the individual. Okay. And there's lots of things. So the mother talked about ways that just kind of normal things that they used to hide vodka, which is what the addiction started with. And it was a simple water bottle, right? How can you tell the difference between water and vodka? They're both clear substances. You can mix both of them. They're both essentially odorless. But when you shake up water, there's no bubbles really quickly. When you shake up a substance that is mixed with vodka, those bubbles stay in there. So whoever put that up here, you put water up there, I appreciate that. That's not vodka. But she brought in kind of a lot of different examples of the things that she saw in her son's bedroom. She talked about how, and they had really gone through the spectrum with their son. And at one point, she saw kind of a stuffed animal, and she was at the mother was at all sorts of depths of kind of despair of the life cycle of the drug addiction. And at one point, she saw one of the boy's stuffed animals from when he was a young boy, and she saw the stuffed animal on his bed, and she thought, that warmed her heart. She was, he's hit rock bottom. He's gone back to who he was as a little boy, and she picked it up, and she saw, the little white fuzzy stuff that they stuff the animals with, right? And that was on the floor, and she thought that was weird, but she picked it up and she put it in the garbage and kind of cleaned up the room, and she left his room thinking, maybe we've turned a corner here. Maybe my 18-year-old is that young boy, and he's gotten back to a healthy lifestyle. A couple days later, he overdosed on heroin, and the police and paramedics are in the home, and they're looking around his bedroom, and they picked up the stuffed animal, and out of the back of the stuffed animal were a dozen little tinfoil caplets of heroin. And she kind of kicked herself. She's like, okay, this stuff was in my home, right in plain sight, and I'm not really aware of what's going on. And so there are things that we can do as parents and as community members that we can identify obvious signs of drug and alcohol abuse or use, and use those lessons to get the person help. my goal is not to bring people into the criminal justice system. And I certainly don't speak for the chief here. You've got an incredible law enforcement leader across the state, and I know she's going to come up here in a couple of minutes. But she and I have talked about this problem for many years. Neither her goal nor my goal is to arrest people and bring them into the court system because they have an addiction. We know that they're going to cycle through this court system. They're going to be back in our community. I live here. I raised my kids here. I grew up here. They're going to be back in our community. So if we're going to change this problem long term, how are we going to change it? And it's not by arrests, it's by counseling. What can we do to change behavior? And so that's our focus in the court system. That's our focus through our diversion programs. That's our focus in the specialty courts. And I know that's law enforcement's focus, not just here in the city of Elgin, but across the region as well. So it's that partnership. I started talking about the support from the county board and Senator Castro now that she's in Springfield. But that translates and that cuts across not just from the funding sources and from the legislative bodies, but from law enforcement in the community and into the court system as well. So that's our focus, and that's kind of what we're seeing in my office as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a reminder, because I know some people came in late, we will be doing a question and answer at the end. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to hold them, write them down, because I would write them down because I forget them by the time it happens. But that'll be up next. Up next, we have Rob Russell, who is the Kane County Coroner. He's been the coroner since 2012. He is also the Illinois Coroners Association District 1 Director and member of the Kane County Opioid Task Force. He earned his Master of Arts in Political and Justice Studies from Governor State University and is involved with the South Elgin Lions, Elgin Church's Flag Football League, and member of the First Baptist of Geneva. Mr. Russell?
Does it work?
We'll try it. Yes.
It works. Yeah. Good evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It is a lovely day out there. I appreciate you taking the time to come out and listen to us, because this is stuff that's very near and dear to all of our hearts. It's something that's very important to us. And talking about both, alcohol and we'll call it opiates, because heroin was really big about 4 years ago. That has now turned into the term of an opiate, because we've got this new substance most of you probably heard of called fentanyl. And fentanyl has been a game changer in my field. It has brought people through my morgue. It has blown my budget. It has done lots of different things, and it's something that it's a very destructive force. But I'm going to first talk about alcohol. Now, the thing about alcohol, I'm going to show you a few numbers. We talk about alcohol intoxication deaths. Now, if you were to spread those out or you were to categorize the alcohol deaths we have kind of two types. One is alcohol deaths that are caused from someone being intoxicated, and another one is long-term use, which causes different types of cancers and whatnot. The types of numbers that I'm showing you here are numbers that are strictly from intoxication. So someone goes out and they over-imbibe in an alcoholic beverage, and they go out and they get into a car crash and they die, or they have an accident, fall off a ladder. We've had all kinds. We also have polysubstance. Sometimes people mix alcohol with other sedatives or other drugs, and it winds up they wind up dying. So we're looking at 13 and 17 and 18 and 15. And when I show you the opiate deaths, you'll see why this presentation is mostly geared towards opiate deaths. We have a couple of issues and challenges with alcohol. Number one, it is illegal. It's a legal substance. So in and of itself, it is a legal substance, and that's as it should be, which is different from opiates, because typically they are not legal. There are legal opiates that are prescribed if the person that's got the prescription is taking it is legal. But also alcohol it's a neutral, or arguably, as I put here, beneficial, but some say if you have a glass of wine every night or so, or every other night. I'm not going to argue that point. I'm going to say it's neutral to health in moderation. So if you use it in moderation, it necessarily isn't going to harm you. But the problem is when people over-imbibe over time, or if they over-imbibe in a short period of time. This statistic is still relevant today. It came out a couple years ago. But the facts of the matter is, in Kane County, in the state of Illinois, in the United States of America, you are more likely to die, a person, especially the ages of 18 to 35, is more likely to die from a drug overdose than a car crash. Now that is again, from 2016 from the CDC. Almost a very large percentage of those drug deaths are opiates. Here are your opiate deaths in Kane County that we've had since 2010. I took over in 2012, so it was kind of on the beginning. Interestingly enough, in 2012, we had 27 heroin deaths, and I know this is kind of a technical term, but we didn't do any autopsies on those 27 deaths. That's important. And what that did is it blew my budget the next year, and I heard about it. But what happened is we started doing autopsies on all suspected drug deaths, as you should do, according to all the best practices and stuff across the country. Now I thought we're doing pretty good in 2013. In 2013, hey, we're down, 5 deaths. So I thought, we must be doing something right. Not sure what I was doing, but then 2014, we're up 1, and then 2015, we were down 1, and then 2016 hit. Guess what also coincides with 2016, between 2015 and 2016? There was a substance called fentanyl that hit the streets. And what happened is we went from 21 to 46, and quickly the next year in 17 went to 67, and then last year we had 68. So we're talking about, what did we have, 15 and 13 crashes that were caused from alcohol? Alcohol can be a killer, don't get me wrong. And it's important that you don't over-imbibe, especially as a young person. I know that's why we do the mock proms and stuff, because people think that, let's go do our prom and let's go and drink and let's have fun. You know how many kids have been killed? A lot. That's why we do our mock proms, so that we try to educate people to say, don't do that. You don't need to do that. This year, thankfully, we just recently had a rash of opiate deaths, but as a longitudinal representation, the last 6 months we've had right around 20 suspected and/or confirmed deaths, which means hopefully, I've got my fingers crossed, and I'm knocking on a wooden head here. Hopefully, we're going to be down this year, and why? I'd love to tell you. I think it's because of something called collaboration. We have been collaborating tremendously with other agencies, with advocacy groups. We started a needle exchange program here, something that a lot of people think is kind of weird. It is, and it is on the surface, but when you see and when you understand the science behind it, the CDC also states that in areas that have needle exchange programs, that people are 7 times more likely to go to treatment. So why wouldn't we? I mean, we're getting, obviously the deaths are going up. Let's think outside the box and let's do some of this stuff, and that's what we've done. We've also started with the sheriff and with the state's attorney. We've got a program called A Way Out, which means people who are seeking help can come to a police station, can come to the coroner's office. I don't care. Wherever, we want to help people. It's very, very important, and it allows them to have a way out and try to get some help. And we share information where appropriate. Now, of course, in law enforcement, it's not always appropriate to share information because they may be working to try to get some of the people that are distributing those drugs. So not all the information is going to be shared, but we'll share it where it's appropriate. And we talk about collaboration. It's, arrangement between 2 or more parties, for a common goal. And that's really what we're looking at. That is what's going to make a difference. It's what's made a difference nationally in some other areas, and it's what will make a difference here in this county. Some examples of collaboration are right here, this forum. Having forums like this, we're working with the community. We're educating the community. We've been working with Sheriff Kane and State's Attorney McMahon. We've been working together closely, trying to share information, work in programs, where we can. We've got the Kane County Opioid Task Force that the Health Department is leading. And we've also been patterning a lot of what we do on the Lake County Opioid Initiative. And why that's important is I'll show you in a little bit. But what they've done is they've created a pattern of what we can do, what the possibilities are. In Cuyahoga County, they were forced basically to get something going because they were hit twice to 3 times as hard as we were with deaths. This is why it's important that we look at Lake County, why I looked at Lake County and why it was important. The Daily Herald did a study on the opioid deaths. And if you look, of course, Cook County, because there's more people and it's a larger area, 213% increase from 14 to 17. Now, not too far behind is a little county called Kane. 204% increase in those 3 years. Lake County, what's different? 23%. Okay? Now, you have to look at that and say, well, maybe the numbers are skewed. Maybe there's a problem. Maybe they're not accurate. To me, I looked at that and I said, I want to know what they're doing. I want to know what they're doing because whatever they're doing, at least on the surface, it appears it's working. And that's why this was so important to me, why this study was so important to me, and why I looked to see what it is that they were doing. And they were collaborating on a huge level. And we have been doing that. All of us have been doing that on a huge level with the senators and with, I had a guy in today from Health and Human Services, from the National Health, Health Services. Had him in today talking about hopefully get some resources. It's about collaboration, okay? That's pretty much speaks for itself. It is a disease, no different than cancer, no different than cardiovascular disease. I have a disease, it's called hand and mouth disease, and it usually has a Twinkie in it. But yes, it is a disease. I think the mayor said that there are people that have different addictions. Clearly my addiction, food. But we need to treat it as such. We need to treat those addictions as a disease. This is the end game, folks. That's it. That's the door to my cooler. And unfortunately, way too many people have come through that door. My goal and why I come out here tonight on a beautiful night and talk to people is because I want less people coming through that door. I think that makes sense to me. So we also we're a drug drop-off site, so we're trying to get some more of the prescription drugs off. So if anybody, if you know of anybody who feels weird about going to a police station or whatever, come to my office. We're the coroner's office, okay? Maybe they feel weird about coming there too. But we're available. We're there. We're there for them. We'll take it. We'll get it to the DEA. We'll dispose of it properly. We also take needles. However, I do not want them together because it makes it too hard. We have to take the needles to a separate place. And the needle thing is not, the accepting of the old needles is not for businesses. It's for individuals, within the county. So I don't want, Sherman Hospital to say, oh, we found somewhere to get, they're obvious. This is for individual people. So we will accept that. We do have a resource that we can eliminate those properly. So come anytime, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. We're there at other times. You can try to stop by. The problem is that's when I know that there's going to be somebody, at least one person in the office. We're a 24/7 office, obviously, but that's when I know somebody will be there for sure. Any questions or comments? I think we're good at the end, but this is my information. If anybody has any questions or they, about anything, please feel free to call me. Please feel free to email me. Of course, I don't have my email on there, but you can find it. Go to the website. You'll see it. This is our Facebook page. Yes, we do have a Facebook page. It's kind of weird for a coroner's office to have a Facebook page, but we do share a lot of good stuff. We don't share anything weird, morbid, or disgusting, or anything like that. It's all about how to thwart, death. How to thwart the different types of death. There'll be different articles, and preventable death is what I was trying to think of. It's all about trying to thwart preventable death. That's all I have. Thank you.
have our Chief of Police. In addition to her 22 years with the Elgin Police Department, Chief Anna Lalley earned her master's degree in Criminal Justice Administration from Loyola U Chicago and is working on a second one through the Center for Homeland Defense and Security at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. Chief Lalley.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
There's your clip.
Thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. So we were asked to come here and present a little bit more and gear it towards more prevention and with teens. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about teens and some of the issues that we do face, but I also want to talk as holistically as the Elgin Police Department and some of the things that we do, whether you're an adult or if you're a teenager. And so just kind of giving the presentation, we'll go through just how to recognize the signs of anything who's substance abuse, alcohol, or drugs. Talk a little bit about what you can do as parents, as community members, and then also just I'll go over our initiatives in the police department and what we are actually doing to help fight this problem. So a lot of basic information in here, but I think it's good that we share it so that everybody's talking on the same page. Underage drinking, serious public health problem in the United States. One thing I do want to mention is in my career here at the Elgin Police Department, I spent 6 years as an undercover officer in the drug unit. And one of the things that you get to see as an officer when you are purchasing drugs, where people think you are buying drugs from someone, during that time, hundreds of buys in we went everywhere in Kane County, in Cook County, we worked with federal task forces. And I can tell you that a lot of times, a majority of the people who ended up with some form of addiction, whether it was heroin, opioids, cocaine, there was an element of some type of substance abuse such as marijuana or alcohol. And that kind of led them down a certain path. And a lot of times it was they started using cannabis, and that's a whole other issue because starting in January, we're going to be obviously figuring out what we're going to be doing here in the state of Illinois and how we're going to approach that. But there was always that, I started using marijuana, the person who I was buying from ended up having cocaine or heroin, I thought, why not? Or that person had alcohol, and then some people ended up going into addiction that way. The other thing too, is that when people are in addiction and you're purchasing drugs from someone and you see people, a lot of people are not just selling drugs. Some people don't use that sell, but some people are selling to support their habit. And so you will see people at their worst. One thing in talking with our youth and trying to say, standing up here and saying, don't do drugs and don't do this. That's a great message, don't do that. However, part of it is showing how it affects people. It affects your family, how it affects you as a person. And seeing the physical effects and seeing some of the medical issues that come with it and seeing some of the opportunities that are missed. And so it was very eye-opening when you would sit with someone who at one point you were buying drugs from, and then you arrest them, you take them in an interview, you sit down with them, and then you talk to them about their life. And a lot of times people started at a very early age, and they started with very small things that they thought were not going to be harmful, and then they ended up to the point where they are completely addicted to a substance that they're having a hard time getting away from. So it's a very different experience because especially as a police officer, and as the state's attorney mentioned, our goal is to find a way to prevent so that they're not in the criminal justice system. And if they are in that system, it's, are you someone who's providing the drugs or are you someone who's using? And those are two different very paths as well. So with drinking, especially with kids, the one thing is, how do I know? And you hopefully parents, and even, friends, people who are involved with people, just what's going on in the home. Are there missing containers of alcohol? Significant reductions in the volume of beverages around the house. Empty alcohol containers. Sometimes it does come with, if someone is abusing alcohol, that their behaviors change. But I can tell you that sometimes that doesn't happen either because people learn how to mask their behaviors. They learn how to, I'm in front of my family, so I need to act a certain way. I need to make sure I'm not doing this. So when I show you the signs of alcohol use, this is something that you have to look at the totality of the circumstances. Are they acting differently? Is there a decline in the way they're taking care of themselves? Are they having mood changes that they can't contribute to something else? So, but I think number one is educating people on what to look for. And number two then is having the courage to ask somebody what's going on and having that conversation. Especially young adults. With social media, that's another part that, 10 or 15 years ago you never had to think about. Social media influences behavior. So whether that's in a good way or a bad way. And so having the discussions and the talks around behavior and what to look for and asking for help, and not making it this frightening thing, I think is something that we also need to pay attention to and mention. And when you look at someone, their physical characteristics, again, I can tell you that, and I think it was the state's attorney that had mentioned that drug abuse and substance abuse, it does not discriminate. It is across every walk of life. I can tell you that as an undercover officer, I purchased from people who were making 6 or 7 figure salaries. I purchased from people who were considered to be experiencing homelessness. I've purchased from, when I was a little younger, I could pass it a high school kid, and so I was, purchasing drugs from people who were in high school. So it's across the board. And so, the signs that you see sometimes, hopefully people who are close to each other will notice that first, but it could be anything from their speech is slurred, they're having problems with coordination, and again, you have to look at these in totality. You have to look at what else is going on except the physical signs. What are their behaviors? And then have the conversation, and sometimes it's not an easy conversation. And obviously, as the coroner had mentioned, that with DUI-related type of incidents and accidents, we do see people, and a lot of times it's a sad story because the people who end up in accidents where people end up getting killed, they are not the people who are intoxicated, and many times the person who is intoxicated lives. And it's a very hard thing to sit with a family and to tell a family member that they are no longer here for no fault of their own except they were driving home from work, driving home from school. And so substance abuse affects not just that person, it's the family, and it's the social circles around the family. And people have a lot of trauma associated with that. So, and it's something that takes a lot of time. You can say, I have a problem. We also at the Elgin Police Department have a program called We Can Help. We've had this program for 2 years. It was a program started by Commander Trost. And basically, that program, if you walk into the Elgin Police Department, it doesn't matter if you have drugs in your pocket and you say, I'm done, I need help. First of all, if you're walking into a police station saying that, you've probably reached a low. We will immediately, we are not going to arrest you. We are going to find you and in treatment in that moment. We will take you somewhere. We have driven people to Chicago. We have driven people 2-3 hours from here, and we will take you, because when somebody comes to you at that stage, you need to help them. And so we've done this, we've been successful, but the key there is that it's when they're ready. It's not when the parents are ready, it's not when their friends are ready, it's when they're ready, and you just need to be ready for them. So obviously with the alcohol-related offenses, and the amount of stress that is brought to a family financially if someone in the family is arrested for DUI or drug possession. And then it's just, especially with the court system, and maybe it was a one-time thing that happened, but in the end people will spend thousands of dollars trying to get out of that problem. Again, other substance abuse, whether it's opioids, heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, whatever the case may be, studies have shown that people who are alcohol dependent are much more likely to be drug dependent. And again, it's a totality of the circumstances, but as I can tell you just from my experience as a police officer and sitting down with people who are addicted, 99 out of 100 times the story started with, I started smoking weed when I was a kid, I started using alcohol when I was in middle school, and then all of a sudden it just started. Because I thought it was no big deal. I was fine when I was drinking, I was fine when I was using cannabis. And so there is a correlation there. So these are just some pictures to I guess draw your attention to. But paraphernalia is one thing too that, you know, if somebody is abusing, whether it's cocaine, heroin, opioids, there's always some type of paraphernalia associated with that. You know, one thing, as the Elgin Police Department, we do have a narcotics unit, and the goal of that unit is to work towards eradicating drugs in the city of Elgin. And part of that is through undercover operations, through search warrants. We would do search warrants, and what you'll commonly find, whether it's packaging for marijuana or cocaine or heroin, is you'll find very small Ziploc baggies the size of a quarter. And people will have hundreds of them. Well, you can't put a sandwich in it. You can't put anything really in it. So what exactly are you using it for? So if, as a parent or as someone who's concerned as a friend, and you start seeing some of these things, you should ask, what are you doing with that? And see what their answer is, right? They may be truthful, they may not be. Maybe that's the interruption that they needed in their life to say, wow, someone's actually paying attention, and I've been trying to throw out some signs here. So don't be afraid to ask. And if you can't do it, find somebody who will for you. Somebody mentioned with tobacco, obviously with weed here in the city of Elgin, the mayor had mentioned that there is an ordinance. You have to be 21 years old, 21 years of age to buy tobacco, e-cigarettes. The other thing that we do as far as alcohol, we will do compliance checks at our businesses. So what we'll do is we'll send somebody who looks to be younger, but they actually are of age. We will send them in to purchase alcohol to see if they ask for an ID. So most businesses, we have we do it 4 times a year in the city of Elgin. Some people fail, some businesses fail. They have to pay fines. And sometimes their liquor license can be revoked if they continue to not check IDs. So same thing with cigarettes too. The ordinance will, there's fines associated to it. Part of with kids smoking in schools, you know, we can write citations and push them into a less formal court system, and whether that's they have some counseling or they have peer jury. But a lot of times too, you're not catching the kids who are smoking. They're getting it from their friends. They're not necessarily going into a store. Sometimes adults will give kids too, which is another thing. So it's just being aware of, you know, what should I do if I see something? Who do I call? You know, should I tell someone? Absolutely. So, and then hopefully we can figure out what we need to do from there. Just with marijuana, again, you know, the goal here is just to know that some of the side effects of any type of drug, and again, it's the physical things that you will see. You know, we had, and I can tell you, when I was first in the drug unit, we did a search warrant. And it was a house, and there was heroin sales coming from the house. There were a lot of people in the home. We ended up arresting 4 or 5 people. There was a young girl, and at the time she was 18, 19 years old. And, you know, we arrest her, we sit down with her. This is the first time she'd been arrested, and we talked to her, you know, what's going on, and so she kind of said, you know, this is kind of how I started, and then I started hanging out with a group of people, and then I started using, and now I'm addicted. And so, you know, we, you know, gave her some options, and we kind of said, hey, you know, if you need us to help you, you know, let us know. And, you know, when she talked about her family, she came from a great family. She had a support system. She did not want for anything. And, she ended up going through the court system. She was a first-time offender. She would receive probation. That was it. Fast forward about 4 years later, we do a search warrant, open up the door, and there she is again. And the difference between 4 years of what she looked like she had aged 30 years. She had contracted HIV. She had a whole host of other diseases. She had medical conditions. She had a lot of things going on. And during that 4 years, she never went and asked for help. And she just continued down that path. And so to the coroner's point, you know, when he shows you that picture at the end, for some people, that's where it ends up. And so I think the reality in having that conversation, especially with young adults, it may be hard, especially as a parent, but you have to talk about the reality. And so one of the things too is I teach at Elgin Community College, and sometimes I'll talk about, you know, drug awareness and, you know, what should you do, and just talking to young adults. And the one thing I do not do is I don't stand up there and, you know, just yell at them and don't do this and don't do that. But I educate them and I show them pictures. There's a website called Faces of Meth for people who are addicted to meth. And when you show young adults pictures and you say, this is what will happen, could happen, and you share stories, and my time in the drug unit and meeting people and saying, you know, these were people at one point in their lives that something happened. A lot of times too, something traumatic will happen which will force people to start using. And these are people with hopes and dreams just like everybody else, and something happened and they were not able to get themselves out of that problem. So I think that's how the conversation needs to start. It's just being real, very honest about what does this look like if I started to do this in my life. And then from there, you know, hopefully it starts a very nice and honest conversation. You know, so just for parents, you know, I kind of just went over some of the signs and just some basic information, but for parents, you know, serve as a positive role model, have those conversations, have the hard conversations. As police officers, we have school resource officers who are in our middle schools and our high schools, and a lot of times people, you know, teenagers will feel more comfortable speaking to their school resource officer because they've established a relationship. So us being in the schools or us being out in the community, it's not just to arrest. A lot of that is to form relationships. So at some point, if someone comes up to you because they know you and they want to tell you, I'm having a problem, that they know that you're going to help them. And so the other thing too is obviously with social media and parents, you know, looking and seeing what your kids are doing. You know, where are you going? What party? What's happening there? You know, I can tell you my parents, they knew everything. They were very nosy. To this day, they're very nosy, and I'm going to be 45. So they are, but that's what you need. You know, we have seen that a lot of kids, you know, if they're about to get involved in something and the parents start asking questions, sometimes that will change behavior. Sometimes it doesn't, but at least they know that someone is at least paying attention. So the police department, when we talk about youth, and you know, because I think that's where it starts, you know, how do the behaviors of young adults so that as they grow into adults that they're not necessarily then addicted to substances. And so obviously we do a lot with mentoring, we do a lot of programs, a lot of positive peer motivation. This week at the police department, we have our Teen Citizen Police Academy. We have about 30 kids who are involved. They're meeting police officers, they're doing fun activities, but that's also a way for them to be in a healthy, positive environment, but also to make a connection to an officer. So if they think that their friend might be having a problem and they don't necessarily want to go to their parents, you know, I knew that officer from that day, you know, maybe I could just ask them. I feel comfortable. And so we have a lot of programs. We also have an Explorer post. Our Explorer program is for young adults who are 13 to 19. They meet weekly. The program goes through a lot of different things. The goal is to, you know, work on character development, to work on the things that, the responsibility as a young adult, and to challenge themselves and to, you know, be leaders. And sometimes those are the people who are not afraid to go and have the conversation with their friend. So we do an Explorer program. We also we partner with the Gale Board and Library. We've done this for the past 2 years. We call our program Teen Life. And again, it's 13 to 19. We do a lot of different things. You can see here we bake cookies, we do art, we do anything from movie making. So we do a lot of different things. And again, the goal of that is the event itself, but it's also because officers, you can see in the one picture would be on your right, that's Hector Gutierrez, and he's actually here in the other room doing the program. And we were doing looming with kids, but Hector sitting and talking with that young girl and just getting to know her, that relationship, hopefully, if something, even if she's only met him for a half hour, 45 minutes, hopefully she says, you know, this is somebody who I could go to if I was having a problem. So we are all over the place in Elgin. We do a lot of different things. We also have a program called Kids United. It actually starts next week on Monday. Kids United is a program that allows, the age group again is from 9 to 11 on certain nights of the week, and then from 13 to 18 the other 2 nights. So Monday through Thursday, it's at Kimball Middle School, and it's in the evening hours. And again, this is a way for us to provide something other than you know, not having something to do. So activities, events, you know, we're teaching young adults how to make responsible decisions in a fun environment. Every Friday, there's they go on a field trip, so they've gone to different places, baseball games, restaurants, a lot of different things. This is an open program. You can literally show up on Monday at Kimball Middle School. For the parents here, you can sign your child up, and then you're in the program. And so it runs throughout the summer. It allows an opportunity for kids to be involved in something. I mentioned our Teen Police Academy. This is another thing that we do. And again, building trust, having that nexus to someone at the police department. And, we do get teens, the first day at the Teen Police Academy, I'll go in and kind of just say hello and a welcome. And, kids are shy, so they're very quiet. And then by Friday, because it's a week-long event, you'll see they've come out of their shells. And it's a great way, and they're joking around with the officers, and it's a positive environment. And the goal there is, again, just to start with positive behaviors at a young age that hopefully then will influence what they do in their adult years. And then just for our adults, and also for our young adults, so we have a social services division at the Elgin Police Department. Right now, we are also, our social services division offers counseling, referrals to different type of agencies that can help with substance abuse. Anything with interpersonal relationships, family violence, because sometimes those are the things that start people down their path. And one of the things that we did at the police department last year, we started a new unit called our Collaborative Crisis Services Unit. And we created this unit to focus on mental health, and mental health, substance abuse, and people who are experiencing homelessness. And sometimes those all go together. And so our Collaborative Crisis Services Unit has 2 officers, staffed full-time, and we are just finalizing the addition of 3 part-time mental health workers to go with officers and partner with officers. And so we noticed last year, actually in 2018, we had over 700 calls for service that were related to some type of mental health component, whether it was substance abuse or whether it was someone who was experiencing homelessness. And so it takes a lot to really sit down with someone and say, what can I do to help you? And sometimes there is a lot that needs to be done. And so this unit focuses not just on a reactive, when someone is in crisis or someone needs the police right in that moment, but also proactive. So when people do overdose, what we'll do is within 2 days after the overdose, if they survive, we will go out to them and say, what can we do to help you? Right now in this moment, what is it that you think that, this happened to you, you made it through, is there something that we can do to help? So we have a lot of different things going on, and also collaboration is the key too. So we do work with our partners in Kane County, the Gale Board and Library, CSHE, everyone who's been really great, because everyone has the same common goal, is to educate, and then hopefully that leads to prevention. And then, in the end, hopefully that people are not engaging in behaviors that can be ultimately destructive. So that's us. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Up next, we have Ms. Kelley Flinn. She worked for the Kane County State's Attorney's Office as an Assistant State's Attorney from 2012 to early 2018. And she's currently an associate with the Law Office of Emmy Morales Salazar and Cohen, Donahue, and Walsh. She practices traffic, criminal, and real estate law. Ms. Flinn graduated from Valparaiso University School of Law and was admitted to the Illinois Bar in 2012. Ms. Flinn?
Thank you. Thank you. Like Chief Lalley touched on, I think that I am more of the reactive portion of this program, and the reason being is because I usually see youth and even adults who are suffering from addiction or have issues with consuming alcohol when they are in a time of crisis or when they are in a time of need. And I can tell you, at least from my experience in my current occupation, most of the time it's a reactive action because they have been charged with a crime, or there has been an incident or an incident of trauma that has caused them to come see me to hire me as an attorney. And usually at that point, I can tell you in my experience, it's not usually the first time that either there's been a substance abuse issue identified, even with some of our youth, and I'm talking ages 13 to 21 really for the most part for that portion. More specifically, I think something that Chief Lalley touched on, and mostly actually all of our presenters touched on, is open communication. For the people that I represent in court, ages 13 to 21, the issue that I see the most is a sincere lack of communication with adults, and with adults that they could go to or trust or confide in, or sometimes a lack of communication between parents and their children. A lot of my clients who are charged with drug offenses, whether it be minor possession or even delivery of a controlled substance, have no real open communication with their parents. So by the time they get to me, I'm the one that gets to hear the life story. I'm the one that gets to hear kind of the situation. And almost 99.9% of the time, there is a mental health component, especially with our youth. And they don't feel like they have someone to trust. They don't feel like they have someone to go to. They don't feel like they have someone they can confide in. And what happens is they turn to their friend or someone that they think is their friend, or they explore and experiment to a degree that gets them into trouble. And it's never usually the first time they try it, though our mayor is very correct. It can take one use of heroin to become addicted to something of that nature. What's most really determinative, though, besides the lack of communication, is the idea that they have no idea of the consequences that they face when they become charged with a criminal offense. They have no idea that possessing a small amount of cocaine for their friend, or if they're using with a friend, what those consequences can be. And yes, we have programs in Kane County and with the police department. We have tons of great resources that can be used to make sure that those youth are not affected in their lives in the future. But something that I don't think they necessarily understand is when you decide to operate a motor vehicle and you get behind the wheel of a car, whether you've consumed cannabis, whether you've consumed prescription medication, whether you've consumed heroin or cocaine or alcohol, no one thinks about the consequences of what that's like. And my practice, what I can tell you is I've seen a huge upswing of individuals from the age of 16 to 21 or not yet 21 deciding to get behind the wheel of a car, whether they're under the influence of alcohol, under the influence of cannabis, or under the influence of other prescription drugs or illegal substances. And my focus and my thought process when I meet with those people is I ask them, what's going on here? What are you experiencing? And I get the hard truth. I suffer from anxiety. I don't really take my medication. I'm self-medicating at this point in time. Or, I've done this before and I've just never gotten in trouble. And there are programs, like I said, that can get them out of their future consequences, but sometimes there are situations in which our youth are in where they're facing sincere major consequences, like a DUI, which cannot be expunged from someone's record, like a DUI, which their driver's license could be taken away for a certain period of time. And to a 16-year-old, a driver's license is like everything in that kind of circumstance. And to tell them that they can't get behind the wheel of a car because something like this happened and they were charged with DUI, whether they blew or didn't blow, or whether they submitted to a blood test or not, is like life-altering for that circumstance. And what I most focus on with those individuals when I represent them is I want them to know what the consequences are. These are the consequences when you decide to get behind the wheel of a car or an ATV or really any motor vehicle, quite frankly. A boat is also included. That you can face more than just being charged with a crime. You can lose your driver's license. If you decide to get behind the wheel of a car after your license is suspended, that will affect your driver's license in the future for that. I currently have a client whose driver's license went into suspension in 1990 for a DUI when he was 18 years old. 18 years of age. To this day, he is much older, much older, and his license is still suspended, and he will probably never get his driver's license back because the suspension continued, because he decided to operate a motor vehicle continuously afterwards, and he never thought that at this 2019 that he would be in this situation. He never thought, and he can never come back from it. And when I see kids get behind the wheel of a car, whether they get into an accident, because they've consumed alcohol or because they've consumed substances or prescription medication, which is becoming more common, I think, with our youth, and I'll touch on that in a second. They think they're invincible at a certain age, and that's where the open communication comes in. If they don't know what the meth heads look like online, if they don't know that the possibility of losing their driver's license for a year, 2 years, forever, if they don't know that they could hurt somebody else and see the impact of how that affects multiple people inside of their community, they're never going to understand. When I was in high school, I lost at least 7 of my friends to DUI in an accident, at least. And 4 of those were obviously accidents in and of themselves, and multiple people passed away. The consequences from that point forward, and they weren't all alcohol, some was prescription drugs as well, and one of them was heroin. The consequences of what happens after that can never be changed. The trauma that a youth suffers because they are in that situation, or the families of those who may have lost loved ones or whose loved ones may have been severely injured, will never be the same. And to have that discussion early on in even a middle school setting, to talk about those things, for them to have, we live in a time where Uber, Lyft, there's tons of rideshare things. That's a huge thing and a huge conversation to have. And most of the time when I see young people that get into a DUI situation, what happens is they don't think about those consequences. They don't think about whether or not they'll hurt themselves or other people when they get behind the wheel of a car. They don't think about whether or not they took too much of their prescribed medication before getting behind the wheel of a car. Outside of the driver's licenses issues and the issues of DUI that can affect your life forever, I don't think that our youth quite think through the idea that prescription medication, whether you're taking some from your parents or you're trading it at school, what I'm seeing the most is that a lot of people in middle school and high school are giving it to their friends or sharing it with their friends. And the parents have no idea because they don't think that that kind of thing would happen in their household. Keeping prescription medication in a locked location so that it can't be accessed is a really good way to get that obviously started. But to have an open conversation about, if you are prescribed a medication, you should take it as directed. If you are prescribed a medication, you should not take it with other substances. All of that should obviously be a conversation that is had at a very young age. And I can tell you that when it comes out and when I see them, like I said, they're already in trauma, they're already in crisis, and it's kind of like, well, what do we do now? And the programs and the treatment are all great, but what has to continue to happen is there has to still be the communication even after treatment, even after I'm done through the court process. Because whether someone's addicted now, or maybe they tried it a few times and got in trouble, we have to keep the dialogue open later. Because you could try heroin and go through treatment maybe once, twice, or 30 times for all we know. That doesn't mean that they're not an addict or that they're not suffering from any mental or substance abuse. It has to be the continued communication, because I think, at least from my perspective, I do see people that repeat. I do see young people that repeat. And it's always because there's a mental health issue or that something has not been addressed and they don't feel open and comfortable to discuss kind of what they're feeling, how they're feeling, and why they're doing what they're doing, or what they need to overcome that, or what support they would like to develop from that. And I think based on all of that, the only other thing that I could say would be there is a program that is mandatory when someone is charged with DUI. It's called the Victim Impact Panel. And it's done once you're sentenced or, as part of your sentence in DUI. Things like the prom, demonstration where there could be an accident. Those are all things that our youth need to see. And things like the Victim Impact Panel where people can hear whether or not someone has been affected by DUI, like maybe their loved one has died because they were hit by a drunk driver, or to hear from someone who has affected someone's life. To hear from a person who may have severely harmed, maimed, or killed another individual because they got behind the wheel of a car is super impactful. And to have those conversations, I feel like on our youth, is way more important so that they know what the consequences are down the road. So they know where someone's life could be if they decided to make that decision. Thank you.
Now we have Jim Brunetti, who is the Clinical Director of Services at Renz Addiction Counseling Center in Elgin. He's responsible for overseeing the entire counseling department and daily operations. Mr. Brunetti has also taken a proactive approach to treating drug addiction in Elgin by riding with the Elgin Police Department and doing Narcan training, home visits, as well as facilitating smart recovery groups in the Kane County Jail. Okay.
Yeah, I'll use a clicker. I just want to say it's great to see youth out here tonight, and you guys are here and you're listening, and it's really important to communicate with each other. These are all really good facts that we heard. So it's important to support each other, go home, have conversations with your parents, have conversations with your friends, and keep that conversation going, because this is very important. I'm sure that you guys go to school with people who are vaping. I'm not going to ask you for names, but right, there are people vaping in your schools. Yeah. People drinking, probably, right? And people using drugs. So, you know, this is about you guys being able to take something from here and then learn from it, because by the time people come to me at Renz, sometimes it's, you know, people have gone to jail, they've had multiple arrests, they've gotten into trouble. So one of the reasons why I was excited to come here is to reach out and talk to people and try and prevent that. We have prevention services. You guys do a great job in going into schools and talking to people and making it a real conversation instead of something that is just kind of like, you know, yeah, I know it's out there and I know it's bad, but then when peer pressure happens, when all your friends are starting to use, you forget all the information. So, you know, some of the stats that we talk about, the overdose deaths and the arrests and the accidents, these are real things that happen. And over time, you know, being in this field, you hear about these unfortunate accidents. Legalization of marijuana is a big thing, okay? Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's healthy, you know? There's medicinal marijuana, but what does it cure? It doesn't cure anything, you know? Marijuana is still a mood, mind-altering substance that if you are an adolescent, that is going to stunt and slow down the development of your brain. So while everyone else is growing up and going to college and they're getting degrees and they're using their brain to make a living, you know, to make money, to buy things for themselves and support their family, people who have used drugs for a long time, their brain can be stunted. So they're not able to think. The cognitive and reasoning and decision making, all those areas are affected. So these are things to keep in mind. Which one did I do? That way? Oh, that way. Here we go. Okay, so Renz. Who's Renz named after? It's named after this man. Back in 1961, James Renz started community concern for alcoholism because there was an alcohol problem in Elgin. So 61 years later, here we are. And now it's not only alcohol that's a problem, but it's all addictions. And addictions could be anything that kind of gets in the way of your everyday function. If you need something and you have to have it for you to function, and if you're going to not go to work or school, spend all your money on it, isolate, if it's getting in the way of your life, that's an addiction. So addiction can be, it could start in the 4th grade with vaping, because that's kind of where it's starting. There's lots of vaping going on in school because there could be no scent. It's not easily detected. But you always don't know what people might hand you in the vape. It might not be vape. It might be marijuana. You know, so you can't trust what people or at a party or so-called friends are telling you are drugs, because what's happening now with fentanyl is that drug dealers are in this for a profit. They don't care if you're going to have a good time or if you're going to use it one time or if you're going to use it a lifetime. They worry about a profit. And that profit comes at a cost. And the cost could be lives. We've had 68 overdoses in the past year. 70,000 people a year die from opioid-related deaths. You know, fentanyl is to blame, and fentanyl has really kind of changed the game with that and taken a lot of people's lives. Fentanyl it's everywhere. It's in Kane County, it's in Elgin, it's in St. Charles, it's in Chicago. It's coming through the streets through drug dealers because, like I said, they want to get people hooked. So fentanyl is being put in marijuana. It's being put in cocaine. So people think they're doing different drugs, but they're actually not. Because fentanyl, there's a physical dependency that happens with it.
And after you use it for, you can use it for a week or so, and then you can't go without it. You go into something that's called withdrawal, which means you're sick, you have the flu, and you need more of it. If you don't get it, then you can't sleep, you have diarrhea, you have fever, and it's pretty ugly. So thanks to this man 61 years ago, James Renz. So this is one of our two buildings. We have One American Way where CSHE and prevention and our administrative offices are in. And also we have 2 American Way. That's my office. If you guys want to bring me Jimmy John's, knock 2 times, I'll open. I'll come get it. So we have groups here. We have individual counseling. We have a psychiatrist. We have medication-assisted treatment. We have open groups. We have a friends and family group that is open to all friends and family members of people who are addicted. And even if you want to come in and explore, if you're curious and if you want to learn about drugs and addiction, it's an open group on Wednesday nights at Renz Center. I have flyers out front, so make sure that you get one. Right behind Renz, we have this piece of land, which is really, really nice, and Prevention Services uses it in the summertime, but we'll have a picnic for our clients next Tuesday, because what happens is when someone is addicted to drugs and alcohol, they're isolating themselves. They're not going outside. They're not playing basketball. They're not playing volleyball. They're not sitting out at a pond. So along with counseling, along with drug testing, we like to get people back to their everyday life. Things that they were avoiding doing, it's important to kind of get that into counseling and make it part of treatment as well. So we have a really nice piece of land that we utilize in the back. So clinical services, we have intensive outpatient services. And what that means is if somebody is using a great amount, and if they're arrested and went to Kane County Jail and they're coming out, their probation officer will refer the person over to us, and then we get them into intensive outpatient groups. They're classes, 4 nights a week. People come in for about 3 hours at a time, and we teach them about drugs and alcohol. We also talk about where they are with their treatment, and then we also kind of help them get their life back together. Be careful who you pal around with, making new friends, trying to get a job. So getting people back on their feet, from A to Z, all the different areas. But this is something to look out for, because, like I said, I'm glad that there's youth here, because we want to prevent you guys from getting to that point, but also to be leaders in the community. And if there are people that are using, tell them about some of the things that you've learned today, because these are all things that really happen. We drug test everybody that comes in, sometimes twice a week. So if anyone is using marijuana, we could detect it within 3 weeks. If they're using any drugs, we could detect it. And we get all types of excuses, and they say that they're not using. Poppy seeds off a hot dog bun could come up positive for opiates. So somebody, once brought in a receipt from Portillo saying it was a hot dog. It wasn't a hot dog. They obviously used. But what happens with people who are using is after a while you learn how to manipulate and you start lying. You learn how to cheat the system. But because of our drug testing that we have and our licensed counselors, we have social workers, counselors, and CADCs, we're able to sniff that out and get them back on the right track. We also do DUI evaluations. We have a certified gambling counselor. Gambling, is kind of a hot topic like marijuana. So it's always been a problem, but anytime you take something like marijuana and gambling and make it, more available to the masses, well, more people are going to be introduced to it because they see it as a safe thing and legal. So if you know of anybody with a problem, we have counselors that can help them with that. Medication-assisted treatment, we have an injection called Vivitrol that's given every 3 weeks, and that helps with alcohol cravings. It also blocks the effects of alcohol, and also with opiates. It blocks the effects of opiates if somebody were to use, and it also reduces cravings and withdrawal. And recently we've begun a really aggressive effort to start a Suboxone program. So that's something that we hope to get going pretty soon. And we are a community agency, so we work with all the other agencies. So we've talked to Lighthouse in St. Charles, and we would refer to them, and they would refer to us in the north end of the county. So it's about just kind of working together with all different agencies to help people. Smart Recovery is a free and open meeting that is an alternative to AA. We also have AA meetings, but I've started Smart Recovery meetings throughout town. We just started one at Ecker Center on Mondays at 4 p.m. It's a free open group, so people come in. It's a process group. They talk about addiction. I do Smart Recovery in the Kane County Jail on Thursdays. I'm traveling between pods and trying to help people while they're in jail, but also connect them with resources and services once they get out. And we also we have a contract with Kane County Drug Court. So drug court is a very strict program, but if people come in and if they come to services and they're not using, that could reduce their whatever crime that they had. So it's a really good thing. And also with Sheridan Correctional Facility, we get referrals from people from Sheridan as well. We take Medicaid plans, Medicare insurance, private insurance, Aetna, Cigna, Humana, Blue Cross Blue Shield, PPO. We do a sliding scale with proof of income. That means we take non-insured people. So if someone doesn't have any insurance, they would just have to bring proof that they are working. It could be a paycheck stub or W-2, and we'll adjust the sliding scale to where they could come in and get services. We don't turn anybody away. We're here to help. There's people that come in and I get a call from the front desk and our receptionist is like, they don't have any money. They don't have this or that. So, usually we'll get them in with, and the next appointment they'll have to bring in documentation or money or something. But we don't turn somebody away if they don't have everything right away, because people are coming to us not because they're having a great day, because they're struggling, and we're here to help people. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that. No worries. Okay, so drugs. And drugs are different because now people are getting drugs from medicine cabinets, and it's people are just handing it out maybe in school. Might tell you it's Adderall and it's not. You don't know what it is. So if you don't know what you're putting in your body, don't do it, because there are overdoses. There is the risk of addiction and becoming dependent on something. So always think, is this something that is going to, could I die from this? Will this affect the way I think? Will this be an embarrassment to myself if I get arrested and go to jail, or my family if they have to bail me out? So those little things are not harmless. They're not fun. They could actually cause lots of damage to your life. I'm going to date myself. Anybody remember this? This is your brain on drugs. There was a commercial back in the 80s where somebody cracked an egg on a frying pan and they said, "This is your brain," and it was a frying pan, and then they put the egg on it and the egg fried really quick, and they said, "This is your brain on drugs." And that's basically what happens is drugs, it's not magic, it's not harmless, it's making your body overwork, it's making your brain overwork. There's something called dopamine in your brain, and dopamine makes you feel really, really good. Runners get runner's high, they're on a dopamine high, or someone who a natural dopamine high might be experiencing the birth of their child, or getting a good grade on your report card, or hitting the last minute shot, or getting your first date. Those are all dopamine experiences. But drugs deplete your brain of dopamine. So fentanyl and heroin and all these drugs that are highly addictive and popular because they're supposed to be so fantastic feeling, what they're doing is it's depleting your brain of dopamine. And once it's depleted, it might reset. You might gain more dopamine, or you might not. So that means that you might not be able to feel again. You might not be able to naturally feel joy, pleasure, happiness. So what happens is your brain becomes fried, like an egg, and it happens pretty quickly, and then it doesn't function as well. So marijuana, marijuana is like the new, it's not a new thing, but people are talking about marijuana being legal, so it's like, okay, well, it's harmless. It's like alcohol. It's not harmless. Marijuana does is, again, THC is a chemical that's responsible for most marijuana, and it affects your brain cells. And the more you smoke, the more brain cells are being overworked. And the more they overwork, the more they're going to vanish and disappear. So you might feel good when you smoke marijuana, but more long-term use, you become dependent, you'll need more marijuana as time goes on, and then once you stop using marijuana, your brain might not be able to function without it. So these are all things that, it's your brain wasn't orchestrated to need marijuana. So when you when you smoke marijuana and you put chemicals into your body, it really damages your body beyond repair sometimes. So that's something to think about. Okay, this is two images. One is of a schizophrenic brain, the other is a marijuana user. And take a look at there's similar areas here that have pruned away, and you can see how long-term marijuana use after a while eats away at your brain, and that's the same as somebody who has schizophrenia. So smoking marijuana, is it less dangerous than smoking cigarettes? What do you guys think? Anybody back there? No, it's not, right? Because it can cause cancer, and it also could be a lot more dangerous in some ways because of what it does to your brain and your brain chemistry. So e-cigarettes are a really big problem right now, and it starts as early as the 4th grade. And it's something that vaping isn't only the nicotine products that are out there, but there's also manufactured stuff on the street that drug dealers are selling that they say is it's like a marijuana type vape, but actually what it is, it could be it could be rat poison, it could be antifreeze. So be careful of what you vape and what you put in your body, because there's still harmful chemicals that you're putting inside yourself. Teen alcohol abuse, of course. These are some of the signs to look for, and these are things to keep in mind and also talk to kids about. If you're noticing a change in behavior, there's a really good chance that there might be alcohol or drug abuse, and it's important again to talk to teens. Have a conversation. Let them know that if you're struggling or if this is you, it's okay to come to me and let's talk about it. Because if you just make it something that is bad, somebody may rebel and then they may go do it. Or if you make it something that is put so much pressure on them where they feel that they're not living up to your expectations, then they might not talk to you about it as well. So make it something that's very approachable, and something that can be talked about, like with the Way Out program. And it just come to us, and there's you're not in trouble, but come to us and we'll help you, because addiction creeps into people's lives. It's not something that people plan on, but it does happen. So it's important to be educated during these sessions and then also talk about it. And underage drinking. 14 is the average age where people are first trying alcohol, and it's starting pretty early. So with Renz, this is how to start. You call us at this number, 847-742-3545, and you could talk to somebody right away and ask to do a screening call, and then we could get somebody into services. So we're happy to help, and we're in the community, and hopefully you guys have learned something, and thanks for listening.
My first question is for Renz counselor. I am also a medical cannabis patient, and I definitely respect a lot of the work you do. I think we have the same goals in mind. We want to keep our community safe and prevent any harm to our community. I feel like this is more of a statement than a question. As a patient care rep at the dispensary I work at, I work with people with opioid addictions daily, people with cancer daily. And I just want to suggest that you don't dismiss the healing qualities of this plant. Because daily I have cancer patients saying that this is alleviating their tumors. I have opioid patients saying they're off their 20 prescription medication and they're just using cannabis now. It's not about a cure for ailments, it's about alleviating symptoms that we all deal with in life. So I just urge you to consider that, and I hope you don't spread any more of this is your brain on drugs. That is dare fear mongering, and that does not work.
Is there a question?
No, that is it.
Okay.
Well, I think it's good to hear the voice of the community and people that are part of it. Do you want to say anything and comment about that statement?
Oh, sure. Yeah, everyone is entitled to, that was, you make a really good point. But, that's your stance coming from, where you work, and from where I work, I see how people who are prescribed cannabis, are smoking more than they should, because we drug test them, and instead of the amount that they should be taking, they're not. Because we see people who have an addiction problem, and that's not saying that everyone who who drinks or, you know, is using medical marijuana has a problem with it. I was just coming from what I see. Yeah, not to, you know, dismiss anything you do. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Sure. Yeah.
Keith over here has a question, so we'll let him
Thank you. Keith Goings. I just want to ask the coroner. You said before that you went over budget with the number of autopsies that you had done. Has there been an increase to your department's budget?
Every year. Every year.
Oh, Rob, could you? We recorded it, which you heard.
Yes, every year.
It's
Okay. It's been a continual battle that I'd rather not get into here tonight between the chairman and I. But yes, it's definitely affected my budget and started when I took over because we weren't doing autopsies on suspected drug deaths. So the stance of the National Association of Medical Examiners and some of the other forensic organizations out there say that on every suspected drug death, you really should do an autopsy because you've got to rule out any natural event. We don't want to skew the numbers, by it not being correct. So that's something I took on right away, and it made a big difference. There were other issues that we were underfunded with, but that was a big one.
Thank you.
What are other ways that... Use the mic, please. We're recording and we can't hear with the mic.
What are other ways that we can decrease the death rates instead of collaborations? And what are other ways?
Well, I mean, I can tell you, we've seen kind of a decrease in DUI offenses, and I think one reason is because of the reliance on like ride shares. And so part of it is we have a new generation that you're all part of that is very comfortable using ride share apps like Uber and Lyft and things like that. And I think the message has gotten through that drinking a little bit and driving is dangerous. It's dangerous for you. It's dangerous for the other drivers on the road, people who are going to work, coming home from work, going to school, etc. And so I think spreading that message, relying on Uber, relying on designated drivers, is working. And so that's kind of a simple everyday step that you can use. That when you're of age and you want to go out and whatever, celebrate and have a good time, I think everybody up here, would encourage that, but encourage that in a way that is responsible for both the individual going out, but then responsible for the community as well. And you can do that by relying on people like Uber and Lyft and designated drivers. So that's one kind of simple, practical step that I think that you can do to collaborate.
Chief, did you have anything to add?
And I'll add to that a little bit. Being that one friend that says, hey, think about it, because it's like you want to feel included, you want to feel part of, everybody else, but as soon as you see that one team that says no, and they have a reputation to be of respect, then they're more likely to say, okay, maybe I'll go over here then, as if I don't have anyone that might be the voice like myself. So definitely be that difference in your group of kids.
I want to follow up on that because that's a message that I hear over and over, is that young adults, they want somebody to step forward and demonstrate some leadership. So your suggestion to be that person is really important. Be that person in the group, not the person that is trying to be the damper on the fun night or whatever, but be the person that shows leadership and says, one of us needs to be responsible and drive us and get us home safely, or one of us needs to make sure that if somebody did drive to the party or what have you, that they don't get back in the car and drive themselves home. And that level of respect that you'll gain by doing that, by demonstrating that leadership, will pay huge dividends for not just you, but your friends as well.
And the other thing too, and again, I'm just kind of going what he's saying too, but one thing is, you know, as young adults, you know, we can't pretend to understand what you're thinking, going through your likes. So I think sometimes, you know, police officers, and I'll speak from a police perspective, we try to, you know, we try to come into your world like we are part of it, and sometimes that doesn't work. We need to be the adult. We need to be a good leader, a role model. It's not to say that we can't be, you know, a friend to you, but we have to recognize that you guys are at a certain stage in your life, that we were at our life at one point, and be someone who can give you some good life advice. Because one thing too that people don't think about, as I mentioned before, I teach at Elgin Community College. And I teach an intro to criminal justice class. So these are kids who are straight from high school, and some of them are still in high school. And most of them want to go into law enforcement. And what I always tell people is, you know, before you do that stupid thing that you're about to do because it's funny and your friends are encouraging you, and, you know, that one thing that's going to be 2 minutes of your life, that 2 minutes of your life will follow you for many, many, many years. And so it's, you know, it's a sobering message. You think, well, you know, we're just having fun. How harmful could this be? Fast forward when you're, you know, in your early 20s and you're trying to get a job, something that you want to do, that you're interested in, that you want to make a career of, whether it's law enforcement or something else, and now somebody's asking you about that thing that you did when you were a kid. And it's okay to make mistakes as a kid. It's making sure that people are learning from the mistakes and also creating an environment where it's not so you can never recover from a mistake. Because I've also seen where, especially in law enforcement, where people do get arrested and they are worried about that. They're worried about this one thing that will now follow them forever. So we try to use diversion programs. We try to make sure that people know that this is not the one thing that's going to just change. It may change your life forever, but it can be, there's something that you can recover from. And I think that's important in any message as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just real quick, I wanted to piggyback on that.
Okay.
You asked a great question. And as the coroner, I would love to tell you I've got all kinds of answers because it's something that is obviously near and dear to my heart. I would ask you, do you know of anything? Can you think of anything? And I'm doing it seriously, and not in a smug way or anything like that. I'm actually, I believe you guys are the future. I mean, all you young folks here are the future, and we are going to at some point rely on you guys to tell us what we need to do. And I think young minds, I think there could be something in there that we're not seeing. And I would love to hear it if you've got any ideas.
Maybe not more police officers, more like adults can be more into the social media instead of like just the mayor, whatever you guys can see. Like you guys should maybe we should go undercover on social media and try to figure out more what's going on in there.
Yes, I know there is some of that going on, but again, if you go into law enforcement, you may be the guy working with the gal, with the other guy that you know, creates a program like that. So these forums, it's not only for us to inform you, but I want to learn some things from you as well. And I think that we can do that.
And if I may, I think that when you're a youth and you're on Snapchat, or you see something on Snapchat or Instagram, or there's something that grabs your attention where you think that maybe something's not right, or, I mean, let's be honest, people put everything on Snapchat these days, okay? And I know that, and I'm younger for my age in terms of this panel. Sorry, guys. So I see that, and I see some of my friends that are doing that, and I don't have a problem saying, I don't know what you're thinking by smoking a bowl on Snapchat, but everyone saw it. Like, you shouldn't do that. I don't know what you're, like, when you shouldn't be. I don't know why you're posting that you're blackout drunk on Instagram and you think that's funny. It's not funny. You know, being passed out and being blackout when you're not of age, or even when you are of age, is not funny. And also recognizing, and I know that we use social media in a way to vent in a lot of ways, because we don't have to have an interpersonal relationship with somebody else. You know, you can post on Snapchat all of your thoughts and feelings and just send it out and not get consequences back. You can do that on Facebook. You can do that on Kick. You can do that just about in any way, shape, or form. When you see that from somebody else and you recognize that maybe they're going through a sadness or some sort of, you know, mental issue, or if they're just having a hard time, there is nothing wrong with asking if someone's okay or if they want to talk about it. And if you don't feel comfortable, you know, taking on that burden, or if you seem, you know, more empathetic and you think that someone else needs to know about it, you can't be afraid to say something about it. Because that, as a youth, is how we're going to help solve that problem in a lot of ways. Because those are the ways that we're communicating these days. That's how we're communicating with each other. And to take a leadership role, like Mr. McMahon said, and be that person is huge. But also to know and identify kind of how we're communicating with each other and what to do when you see something that you might, you know, in your head you're like, well, that's not really funny, but that's kind of weird. To tell someone or share that and make sure that it's addressed.
And never assume that somebody else is going to ask too, because then you're like, oh, I'm sure somebody else is going to ask. Just be that one person that asks. Yeah, go ahead.
I actually have a personal person that I know that, and multiple people that I know that that smoke, and they post it on Snapchat, whatever, they post it on their social medias. What can I do for I can help them instead of, like, I've told them multiple times like what's wrong, and I've asked them like multiple times like what is there that I can do, but they just don't give me a specific answer. Like, could I report that to like the LGBTQ? Could I just do something else about it?
So let me ask you this question. Is there an adult that you can think of right now that you would trust for them to just have an open conversation about what you've seen and how you feel about it? Can you think of one adult that you could have that conversation with?
Yeah.
Okay, go to that adult and ask them. Ask them what, you know, talk to them about it. Tell them how you're feeling. Tell them what you're seeing. And see, you know, it doesn't, yes, a police officer would be a great person if you trust that person. And I can see how you would feel like you don't want to be the tattletale or the bossy pants that's like, don't do this, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, if you see it and you care about that person and you don't, you know, bring it up and you don't do something about it, you might regret that later. And it's important to have that open dialogue, because you saying something to that person or to an adult could save their lives later, or could keep them from making a mistake later in life. And that's unfortunately, with being a young person, they don't think about those consequences. They don't think about, you know, once it's off to Snapchat and out on the internet, you know, it might not be saved, but a ton of people saw it. And it's their rest of their lives and the consequences that they need to be aware of.
Thank you very much.
She has a comment over here. Go ahead.
No, and just if you know, going to the police too is one of those things where, you know, if you want to talk to one of us, absolutely, and we can, you know, give you some resources and figure out if you need some help, you know, because we want to make sure that you feel comfortable too. So we're absolutely, you know, we can touch base after here too as well.
All right, this will be our last question.
Well, it's not so much a question, but I have a couple things to say. Number one is, you guys talked about prom and preventing and doing activities. I applaud Larkin for what they did. I don't know if that maybe can be implemented for the other schools in the U46 district. They did a really good program in regards to, you know, busing them to a location, taking them to an after program. They went bowling, they did all these different activities. They got home, they got bussed back, and then the parents went and picked them up. So compared to the other high schools, it's, you know, you go to the prom and then you leave and then you go to the after parties or whatever. But I was very pleased with what Larkin did, and it's not even one of my kids that go to Larkin. It's just someone that was invited that was there. So that's number one. Number two is, he made a comment in regards to drugs and alcohol, but that's also behavior. You know, seeing the girls right now, these kids, you know, this is my son, he's 14. But the kids are at the age that they wanna do the girlfriends and the boyfriends and they wanna hang out and they do all that. Respecting each other is very important, because the way that you touch a young lady or how you express about them, their mothers, their friends, their cousins, whatever, you know, that's very important. Trying to stop that. Number 3, I'm very happy with the Renz Center, and I say that because I enroll my son in multiple programs. Right now, Ricardo Vasca is, you know, I've spoken to him about certain situations I see in children, and I say, you know what, I'm concerned about this child. And what he does, he says, you know what, I have a soccer team. Let me put them in the soccer team. Let me embrace them. We're gonna go to the track. Let me go have them go running. He said, you know, it's 8 o'clock at night, we're gonna go ahead and have them run. So they're too tired on a Friday night to do something. They're gonna go home, take a shower, go to sleep, and do that. So the other thing is that they did the CGTI program. You know, she's very involved with that. I am very happy, because I also put my son in that program.
CGTI is Sabrine Goodwin Teen Institute.
Yes, so that's that. The summer program is gonna be coming up, going to the meeting on Friday. The other thing that I wanted to say was in regards to the programs, the free programs that you have. I enrolled my son in that safety program, the one that self-defense program. So he was registered with that. I happened to bump into that, so I don't know if maybe you can correlate with the U46. We get emails all the time from U46, maybe posting it on there and telling us, hey, this is what's gonna happen. I didn't know about the Larkin and the impact with the people in Wisconsin. Maybe putting it on there so that more people can come and associate it. I know about a lot of the programs because of Ricardo. He tells us and he expresses it, and then we share it from there. So it wasn't more of a question, just like little comments to maybe they can be implemented.